All right, this is Mike Side, the Inequality Principle. And I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days. I've been watching a lot of Metatron videos, a lot of Jonathan Paggio, I can't really pronounce his name, videos, and a lot of their criticism of other people's videos. And here's what I need people to do, right? I am conservative in terms of I don't really like what's happening to nations. I don't like the gender confusion. I don't like the marriage attacks. I don't like the DEI initiatives. I don't like any of these things, right? Let's just get that out the way. So when I saw the casting choices of the Odyssey, I was obviously kind of annoyed, but there was something in the back of my mind saying this is Chris Nolan, so he may be doing something that we may not be expecting. And when I watched the Odyssey, I came out with the same exact perspective as a lot of these people that say this is a conservative film. And there are a lot of liberals who are also saying this is a conservative film. It's not universally a right-wing perspective that this is a conservative film, nor is it a left-wing perspective that this is a conservative film. But I think that Michael Knowles and Jonathan Paggio, whatever his name is, are closer to the truth than I think anybody else, because I like to write stories. And if I create a character and put them in my story and they're, a specific subtype of people, and then I kill them within the first 3 minutes of telling that story, I'm trying to illuminate you to an idea, right? Like if I have a character who's handicapped in my story, he can't use his legs, and then they airdrop him into a war, and then from him getting airdropped, he gets shot out the air, within 2 seconds, because he can't cut his parachute like everybody else and dive bomb to the ground because they all have superpowers, right? Then I'm trying to illuminate to you that, hey, maybe this handicapped person shouldn't be in the war. That's essentially what I am telling you without telling you it. If I tell you it, then I kind of am insulting your intelligence, and I think you're too dumb and naive to see the context of what I'm putting it in, and I don't want to insult you, so I won't tell you straight up. But if I do that, that's literally what I'm saying. So as a creative, I'm perceiving what he's doing as a creative. And I look at Helen, and he goes, the woman whose face held 1,000 ships, and she turns her face to the other side and it's scarred up. And you go, maybe 500, right? So there's a dig at the original context of what I was putting in the story. So he's essentially saying, I didn't put Helen here because she's beautiful. I didn't do it because she's beautiful. I didn't do it because she sold 1,000 ships. I'm doing it for another reason. And I think people are getting more mad at the casting choices versus the actual message of the story, which is anti-immigration, which is anti-secularism, which is more pro-Christian values and Christian lifestyle and perspective than anything else. So it's kind of confusing how you have conservatives getting mad at it, but I understand because they're not really looking past the casting choices. They're looking at the casting choices and then they're formulating their whole opinion around the casting choices instead of what's actually going on in the movie. So when you have a group of non-Greeks pull up on an island and then begin ransacking it, and then the guy who is actually Greek in the movie speaks Greek to them and says, I thought you were people of the sea, and they go, no, we're Greeks. They're like, haha, look, that's stupid. But they're not really looking at the context of why he would do that. Why would he make only one person in the entire story Greek, and then have them speak Greek, and then have the people who are non-Greek say, we are the Greeks? Why would he do that? Do you think that's just by mistake that he just simply happens to have one Greek? And he's like, I just need a Greek person for this specific scene. Or he didn't even say, oh, that guy's Greek. Oh, have him speak Greek for this scene. He can't speak English. Have him speak Greek for this scene, and have them ask them, are they people from the sea, and then have them say they're Greeks. You think that's just random? You think that's just happening because it's circumstantial and he didn't plan that out? He has no intention behind doing that? And it's all these things that keep happening. You have Lupita Nyong'o, who's playing this twin sister, which is probably the biggest jump scare of the movie. I saw it twice. I jumped both times, where the guy's laying in bed and then she jumps and cuts his throat. And you think that's just circumstantial? Like, you think that's just happening? Or is she portraying the image of the angry black woman and they put her in a position of power so you can't criticize the fact that they made her an angry black woman, right? The whole time she's talking, the whole 3 minutes that she's on screen, she's always angry and she's frustrated and she's bitter, right? She's like the prototypical angry black woman. But he did it in such a way that, oh, look, she's Helen of Troy. Look, she's Queen of Sparta. So you can't criticize the fact that she's an angry black woman now. You just have to be like, oh, look, we're putting in these casting choices. So if you're in an industry where whether or not you can win a specific award is tied to the amount of diversity you have in your movie, and you want that award, you go, okay, they're limiting me on these sides. But how do I include the diversity? And this is how I'm thinking. How do I include the diversity? Engage with their prompt, their limitations they're putting me. Tell a story that's antithetical to everything that they believe, and still get the award. That's what my mindset is. How do I include the trans that I don't want in my movie, but do it in such a way that it still correlates with my belief set and my structure and the way I see the world, right? Okay, the trans is deceived. What is the trans deceived by? That by a person in power who is telling her one thing and the truth is another, right? And then she has to die for it. She has to suffer for it due to his lie. Okay, makes sense. Like so many of these trans kids out here who have parents who tell them they're trans, and because their parents tell them they're trans when they're not, they have to go to the doctor and say they're trans and get their genitals mutilated and, never be able to have an orgasm, never be able to form love, and they end up suicidal and dead off of a deception, off of a lie. That makes perfect sense to me. If that's my agenda, I get them killed immediately. It'd be one thing if I put a trans person in my story and then I immediately turn them into Achilles. They're a killing machine. They're better than every other man in the story. They don't need to improve on anything, and they just go around slaughtering all day, right? And then when you find them in the final room, their body is like 600 bodies all scattered around them, and it's the trans person standing up being like, is the war over? And I'll be like, okay, yeah, that's you're pushing some trans stuff. But if you have a trans person in the movie and you kill them within the first 5 minutes of the movie, what you're trying to import about the trans person being in the war is completely different. And there's like 2 lines that they say outside of the context of getting killed when they're like, okay, why did you come here? That's what Matt Damon asked her character. Why did you come here? And then Sinan goes, oh, I wanted to be here. And then they go, you might die doing this. You may not survive. He goes, well, can you just, when you get home, can you tell my family that I was brave and maybe make it a little better of a story? Saying make it better of a story is implying that they weren't that good of a warrior. It was implying that they probably needed a lot of help, were probably in a lot of bad situations, and they couldn't save themselves from it. So he was like, can you just, juice it up on some parts? Right? All these things are in the story. And how conservatives are missing it, when every single time Odysseus' army goes to an island, they're getting chased off because they're illegally immigrating to those islands. They're either getting killed, they're getting transformed into pigs, they're getting eaten, they're getting eaten by Hydra, they're getting destroyed by nature or Zeus or whatever. The fact that this isn't being understood baffles the mind. And how do you watch this movie and look past all that symbolism? Like, how do you watch a movie of people getting on boats, going to islands, going up to those islands, and when they're on those islands, they begin eating their food and trying to take their pigs and encroaching in their land and encroaching on their territory? You're watching all these things happen, and then they suffer the consequences for doing that. And then you go, this isn't about anti-immigration. How do you do that? How do you watch from the beginning of the movie, these guys are in Odysseus' house, and they're eating his food, and they're trying to beat up his kid, and they're kicking his dog, and they're insulting his servants, and they're sleeping with his servants, and they're making their mother feel trying to sleep with his mom, and trying to take over the kingdom, right? They're trying to do all these malicious things to him. And he comes back and kills them all. How would that say, hey, you shouldn't go into a person's house and abuse their kindness? How is that not part of the movie? Right? And that if you do abuse their kindness, you deserve death. You know? It doesn't make any sense how people don't pick that up when it's so obvious. But again, it's the casting choices that are blinding people to the fact that this is a conservative movie in terms of ideals, in terms of how they perceive the world, in terms of almost every aspect of how they would want a movie to be constructed. You know, the father returning home, restoring order, the son's put on the throne, the father leaves to the west and restabilizes the world through sacrifice. You know, like, what else do you want? What else? What is a more conservative story than this? That's what we're trying to figure out. I haven't seen one. Maybe Lord of the Rings, you know, comes close. But like, outside of that, like, there's nothing else. Like, it's literally the most conservative story that you can tell. Well, that's all I got. Inequality Principle, Mike Sai, peace out.